Hello, everyone. My name is Stephanie Boozer. I'm with CUGC HQ, and I'm happy to welcome you to today's user share webinar. For those of you who know that Citrix SmartScale is officially gone and are looking for something to take its place, we're so glad that we have Leee and Jake here with us today to show us all about PowerScale. So before I hand things over to them, I'd like to introduce our moderator for today. Yep, thank you. We have René Reighard. René is a Citrix CTA. She's also a CUGC Women in Tech mentor. So we work with her in our Women in Tech mentoring program, and that's been a great program this year. And she's also a Citrix consultant. René, would you like to say hello to everyone?
Welcome, everyone. Thanks, Stephanie. And I look forward to your questions in the question box.
Thank you so much. So as she said, she's going to keep an eye on the questions. So just type those in as you have them. And René will ask them during the presentation today. All right, so we're going to get into it. Our first presenter is Leee Jeffries. Leee is a managing director and consultant and is UK based. He specializes in the delivery of end user compute utilizing Citrix technologies and cloud infrastructure, and you can find him on Twitter at Leee Jeffries. Very nice, easy Twitter handle. Also with us today is Jake Walsh. Jake is a Citrix CTA and a technical consultant, also based in the UK. Jake, you'll probably seen his name on the CUGC website. He's written a couple of blogs for us, and actually he's going to be moderating a webinar for us next week. So yeah, I'll look out for that at the CUGC website. But he also is specializing in end user computing and desktop virtualization and cloud platforms. So I'm going to hand things over to Jake and Leee to get us started. And as I mentioned, type your questions in as you have them. I think they have some natural breaks throughout their presentation today, so they'll stop at the end of each section to take a look at your questions and address those. So type them in as you have them. René is going to keep an eye on those. And off we go. Here you go, boys.
Hi, everyone. It's Leee here. So we've got a pretty packed agenda for you today. We're going through everything that is PowerScale related. So Jake's going to cover the installation, and then I'm going to cover some more of the detailed sort of configuration options and how the script is structured and what it does. So we're going to have a solution overview. So we're going to talk about why PowerScale was born, you know, the demise of SmartScale. We're going to run through the software installation. Jake's got a nice section on that. That's going to walk you through sort of a three-step approach. I'm going to cover the solution configuration and options, all right, as well as the dashboard overview. So why PowerScale? SmartScale was end of life for on-premises Citrix installations. So they had smart tools for a little while, cloud-based smart tools, and SmartScale was one of those. It was originally floated to be end of life 31st of May, and then it was extended to the 31st of July, which of course has now lapsed. When I realized that this was coming to an end, I had a few clients using this as well, so they asked me to find a solution for them. There really wasn't one without them signing up for a Citrix Cloud subscription, which had already been reviewed. So I decided to put something together and started coding up a script. That script later got quite complicated with a few more features, and I added things like scaling metrics. So with SmartScale, you could only scale with certain metrics, and your load index had to be 1,000, I think, or 10,000 for it to scale. Sorry. So I added the option to scale by CPU, memory, load index, and sessions. I also added a personal dashboard or a dashboard to the product, so you can see historically what it's doing, whether or not you've got machines scaled on, how many you've got switched on at certain times. That can also be branded. So what does it do? We can schedule machines to shut down and start up. inside working hours and outside working hours. So start up at the beginning of the day, run all the way through the day, and then shut them down at the end of the day. During these periods, if the machines are highly loaded, you can select a metric and a configurable threshold, and it will actually scale up additional machines for you whilst that load stays high. That load isn't average across the farm. We have CPU memory load index or session-based thresholds. There's a dashboard which shows you how many machines you've got switched on, how many machines it's actually scaled, as well as the average farm CPU memory load index and session averages. That data also has a retention period, so you can sort of store these dashboards. We'll be showing you that later. I actually have some in the lab, and I also have a real life scenario set of dashboards for sort of a 5-day period. And I think now I'm handing over to Jake for installation.
Thanks, Lee. Hi, everyone. So it's Jake here. So I'm going to just run through the installation of the product and then talk about a couple of use cases. Obviously, use cases are fairly unique. They're not sort of not specific to any one organisation, and there's lots of ways this could benefit you. So do feel free to reach out on Twitter or via any other method if you've got any questions about how it could work for you. So installation is really simple, and I've kind of broken this down into a 3-step process. I don't like things that are complicated. I like things that are simple and easy to use, and this is definitely one of them. So 3 steps: download, configure, test. Can be set up on a variety of workloads, PowerScale, so it's platform agnostic. It uses the hosting connection that's set up within your delivery controller, so whether that's VMware, whether that's Microsoft Azure, you name it, it uses that connection to scale up and down. So also, as I said, customization to your needs and requirements, very easy to do. Very easy to tweak that as well to sort of your specific requirements, so times, metrics, all those sorts of things are very customizable. There's a wiki over on the GitHub page as well, so do feel free to have a look at that. Anything you feel is missing, just reach out, shout at either Lee or myself, and we'll have a look into that. So let's start with the installation. So just to keep things nice and simple, here's my little lab that I used to get things up and running, all running on Microsoft Azure, Windows server VMs, running standard operating system, all on SSD storage. I've kept things really simple for this setup, just to show you, just how quick it is to set up. Obviously in production it's going to be slightly larger, hopefully anyway, but just to demonstrate, how quick it is to set up and how you can customize it. This will give you an idea. So yeah, as I say, just got 3 VMs here, 1 DVC, also running licensing and storefront. I've got a domain controller, and I've got an image machine that's got a couple of apps in that I'll replicate with MCS, and it's that pool that we'll be scaling up and down in this example. So before you sort of install the product, there are a few prerequisites. Obviously, you are going to need a Citrix environment. You're going to have a challenging day if you don't have one of those to get this working, I'm afraid. And you will need a machine with Citrix Studio on to run the product. So if you've got a large environment and you don't want this script running on a delivery controller, perhaps because it's already heavily utilized or something like that, then I would suggest a spare machine with Studio on it. You need the Citrix PowerShell SDK. That's included on machines with Studio installed. So as I say, if you're not on a DDC, get Studio on a machine and run it from there. All the machines that you manage do need WMI access enabled as well, so you need to have the firewall ports open for that, and obviously you're going to need a service account that has permissions to talk to that service. For my lab, what I've got is I've got a single service account, so just one account. That counts an admin of the Citrix environment, so it's been given permissions from Studio, and I've made it a local admin of the session host as well because it's doing power operations. So as I say, 3-step process, nice and straightforward. So obviously the first step is to get the product downloaded. So you head over to the GitHub page, download the folder. It's then just a case of creating a C PowerScale folder on the server and download and extract the contents into that folder. The second step is to configure the script. So there are a number of variables that need to go in. off the top of my head, I'm not sure the full number, but there's quite a few. It's very customizable. You can see just in this create config file, you can see some of the comments just about what it'll do and what it'll look at. And before we can run it, we need to configure those. So when you do that, if I just go back one step, you'll see there's a create config file. And what that does is that builds your PowerScale configuration. So that's effectively the first step. That's us setting the product up and getting it ready for use. So once we've downloaded the folder, we obviously open that create config file and start putting in the details. So for a quick start, there's actually only 9 variables you need to have, and that's all I'm going to configure in this instance. Most of that stuff's pretty straightforward, and the other stuff can just be left as is, but these 9 you will need. So I'm just going to run through these just so you know exactly what they are, what they're doing, and why you need them. So obviously you need to tell it the controller it's going to run against. That's the controller that the script will communicate with. You need to give it a machine prefix. So if you've got machines, for example, that start CTX or start Zen, something like that, that's fairly common. You need to tell it the prefix name for the session hosts. In this example, I'm using business start time and business close time because what I want to do is show the script increasing the number of machines up at 6 o'clock and bringing them back down at 6 p.m. in the evening. So this is kind of a typical scenario you might find in a business, let's say, where only 10% of the workforce is actually in outside of business hours. So you can see I've configured the next 2 variables as well, the out of hours machines and the in hours machines. Now in my lab, I've only got 4 machines running. So effectively what I'm saying here is outside of between 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. I only want 1 machine running, and then what I've said is in hours I'd like 3 machines running, and the script will scale that up or down based on the time. The next 2 are very important because without them the script will do absolutely nothing. So you need to give it a username and a password. Now I'd recommend obviously a separate account. Please don't give it domain admin or anything like that. And the final variable is a testing only one. So if you set that to false, it won't do anything. It will just write the output of what it would do to a log file. So when you're setting up and testing, that's quite useful because you can run a test without having anything take place. So once we've put those variables in, it's just a case of running the configuration script. And you can see when that's done, it creates a key file, it creates a pass file. And then what it does is it gives us a completed decision-making file, which I'll just show you back here. So you can see the decision-making file. Effectively, what that create config file has done is it's put the right information into that decision-making file and set everything up ready for us to run it. So once we've done all that, we can test the script. So as I said, it's very easy to do. There's the step 3. This is the 3rd step in that process. And to run the script, all you need to do is run decision making. So as I said, in my lab, I'm expecting to see, because we're in business hours, PowerScale turn on 3 virtual machines. Because we'll just go back a couple of steps. You'll see my in-hours machines was 3. So once the script's been run decision making .ps1, you can see I've got 3 virtual machines turning on here. These are all, this is just a screenshot of my lab in Microsoft Azure. So once you've run the script, the machines will get booted according to your configuration. So let's say, for example, you want to run this on a scheduled basis. You want this to happen regularly. It's not going to be much use manually running the script at 6 o'clock in the morning, at 6 o'clock at night. Nobody wants to do that. So running it as a scheduled basis, very, very simple. You just need to create a scheduled task. However often you want. If you want, for example, this to take place hourly, every 2 hours, once a day, twice a day, it's completely up to you. So all you need to do is create a scheduled task to run with that service account you created that runs the decision-making.ps1 script. The ball really is in your court here. You can run it as often as you like, as little as you like. You could run it, at the time when your business hours ends, at the time when your business hours start. It's very much dependent at this stage on just how how much you want the script to do. If you just want simple VM power on, power off, perhaps twice a day is appropriate. If you want scaling throughout the day, then you maybe need a few more times throughout the day. Really, that's something that only testing and tweaking is going to tell you, and just working out what fits for your environment. So as you can see here, I did some more testing. I adjusted my in-hours machines to just one virtual machine by tweaking that variable, and then reran the config script. That's one thing to remember. So, for example, if you, let's say you've got 10 machines in your environment and you've been using PowerScale for 3 weeks or something like that, and you then go, right guys, we've taken on another company, we've got 100 more staff, I now need 20 session hosts. What you need to remember in that point is that rerunning the decision-making script will rerun with your old configuration. What you need to do is go into your configuration script, change the number of virtual machines, and get it to recreate that decision-making script. That's just a little point to bear in mind. So if your environment changes, then you need to update your configuration as well. So that's the end of the installation and running. As you can see, it's very straightforward. Literally just a case of making sure the right variables are there. You know, for a simple test, just 9 variables will do. And as you can see here, even with a small environment, so this environment's only 4 virtual machines, but I mean, let's take a practical example. If these virtual machines cost, pick a number out the air, £2.50 a day to run. So we've got £10, you know, a whole £10 worth of virtual machines running. If we can reduce that cost outside of business hours, perhaps, you know, we could save £4 or £5 overnight. So obviously with 4 virtual machines, it doesn't sound like a lot, but that's, you know, a 40% difference. So there really is some options, certainly with public cloud here, you know, to save some money and to have your virtual machines started and stopped for you. So that kind of covers the installation. Leee will go into some more complex details around, you know, more detailed configuration and what you can do with the dashboard. And hopefully that gives you an idea of the setup, just how easy it is. For a simple environment, downloading the script, configuring it and running it can all be done in less than 15 minutes. So it really is something that you can just try out. It'll work in your lab environment, it'll work on a production environment. And just remember, you have got that variable, which I'll just show you on here, testing only. So if you are worried about, you know, perhaps you do want to run this in your production environment, but you don't have a lab that's, you know, able to replicate your production environment, you can run it with the testing only option, and obviously then it will just write out to the log file, so you can say with confidence what it's actually going to do. So just a couple of example use cases now. I'll hand over to Leee. So kind of sample number 1 really is about how this can save you some cost in a public cloud. So let's consider a typical organisation, and when I say typical, I mean a kind of 9 to 5 business. Perhaps you've got 5 to 10% of your workforce in overnight, you know, sort of skeleton crew, if you like. In a public cloud, that's not very efficient, because effectively you're paying for compute power you're not consuming. It's not very efficient in an on-premises setup either, because you're, you know, consuming CPU, memory, storage that's not being used. So again, your electricity bill is higher than it needs to be. The wear and tear on your environment is higher than it needs to be. So the real benefit here is PowerScale can be used to reduce those VMs. So if you calculate, for example, that you've got only 10% of your workforce in overnight, use PowerScale to keep only 10% of your virtual machines running overnight. If we look at this in large public cloud environments, you know, if we think perhaps between 6 AM and 6 PM we run at 100%, and between 6 PM and 6 AM, so the nighttime period, we run with 10%. So, you know, effectively for every Citrix session host, we could perhaps save, you know, 12 hours compute time. And that adds up to quite a significant saving, which really isn't a bad return on the 10 to 15 minutes of time spent setting the script up. So this is, you know, really useful for people with public cloud environments that, you know, aren't fully utilized 24/7, because there really are some savings to be had. Another use case I just wanted to talk about, and, you know, these aren't the be all and end all. There are obviously hundreds of different use cases and different ways this could work for you. But let's consider a corporate hypervisor stretched, overutilized, struggling to cope. I'm sure most of you have experienced that at some point. Too many corporate apps, perhaps overnight processing taking place. Perhaps you've gone down the route of asking for more hardware, and you've met with the sorry, no budget at the moment. Well, PowerScale could be the answer for you. If we consider, perhaps let's say another business where overnight it's mostly batch processing, there aren't many people logged into Citrix, well, why not use PowerScale to free those resources up? So let's say, we have 100 Citrix workers, but overnight we can get by with 10. It makes no sense to have the other 90 booted. Why not get those shut down, free up that CPU and RAM for those other tasks to take place? Again, this is an example where PowerScale is effectively giving you something back. So rather than it be a cost saving in this case, it's a saving on your hardware, because out of hours you've got effectively more processing power, more memory, and more storage throughput to use, because that's not being consumed by your Citrix workload. That kind of covers the setup and the use cases really. So yeah, if anybody's got any questions around that, feel free to shout, pop them in the chat window, reach out via Twitter, or yeah, just let me know, and I'll hand over to Leee for some more detailed configuration.
Thanks for that, Jake.
We do have some questions, and I'll start. We have quite a few. I'll stop me if you feel like you will run out of time for your presentation, and we can answer them later. But one of them is, do you guys only distinguish the VM by the prefix, or can you use delivery groups?
Do you want me to go with that one, Jake?
Yes, please.
At the moment, yes, there's just a prefix. However, it would be quite simple to add a delivery group or multiple delivery groups, or even actually tags. So you could tag which machines you wanted to participate. That wouldn't be too tricky either. Or yeah, so I mean, if we can add that to the feature list, I'll put that in there.
Okay. When the decision-making script is run, for how long is the rule effective? And do the rules expire after end period time every day, and it needs to be run the next morning? So do the rule, yeah.
Yeah, so once the configuration script has been run, it effectively writes that to the second decision-making script. And then whenever you run that configuration is what's used. So it only needs to be
I'm going to just jump in there for a second. There is actually a config XML file that's written by the create configuration script. So you will see that, and that will be static and persistent.
Okay, I have some more. Given that you are using jobs rather than run space and multi-threaded the data collection, I'd expect the script to be fairly resource intensive for a large number of targets. Do you see the resource, what do you see as the resource consumption to look like?
That's a good question, actually. At the moment, yeah, it does use run jobs. It sounds like a Jim Moyle or Guy Leach question, that does. It does need to be switched over to run spaces to be more effective with resources. What's the sort of consumption? It really, I think, depends. I've not really managed to nail it down, but I think the actual run groups are for the WMI performance monitoring, all right, to grab the counters. So I would probably say each process is probably about 70% of the original process, in my experience, just watching it run, which is anywhere between sort of 100 and 200 meg. So it could, on a larger state, you could need quite a beefy VM just to run it, yeah.
Okay, do you have time for some more?
Yeah, sure.
Great. Any plans on porting the script to support virtual desktop use cases?
virtual desktop use cases, like remote PC access. I'm not sure what that means.
Okay, we can come back to that.
Okay.
When will this be baked into the next version and configurable under policy or delivery groups? Did you hear me okay?
Yeah, sorry, Renee. I was chatting away and I was on mute. It doesn't matter how big the audience is, it still happens. I said I can probably get the classification via delivery group and tags. I can probably have that done by sort of mid next week.
Okay, I think they were looking for this to not be like PowerShare, but configurable under the policies in the studio, or option under the delivery groups configuration, I think is where they were going with that.
Oh, right, okay. I mean, we can't really integrate it because it's a separate script. We can't really integrate it with Citrix policies. I mean, sure, it could maybe be configurable via something like an ADMX template via group policy preferences, because I could port all of the configuration to the registry and have the create PowerShell script write registry keys. But I think we don't really gain anything from it. I'd like to understand what the use case is for it, really, why, I think.
Okay. Let's see. I'll let you continue and then we'll pick up with some more questions at the next break.
No worries. All right. If you want to flick the presenter mode over to me. Cool. Let me know when you can see that, guys.
Yep, got that.
Okay, excellent. I'm not going to put PowerPoint into sort of a presentation mode because I'm going to be jumping between different things, I think. There's a few things I want to show you as well. So I want to talk about behavior just to start with, because although the script does things, there's a few tweaks and config options that really change how it behaves. So when it's powering on machines, for example, it will always look for machines in maintenance mode and take them out of maintenance mode rather than powering on a shutdown VM. That's purely from a cost saving point of view. You know, you want to use the resources that you've got. There is a way to exclude the machines. Okay, so you can add a tag in Studio, just says exclude, and that will actually stop the script enumerating those machines. All right. Then we've got powering down machines. So out of hours, the script is going to power down machines, and there's two ways that this happens. You can tell the script that not to do it forcefully, and what it would do is it will wait for the sessions to drain before shutting the machines down. Now, you need to start by configuring your session timeouts, your disconnected session timeouts, to make sure that users are logged off after a certain period of time in order for that to make that work. If you don't have those and you are allowing your users just to stay logged on for as long as they like, then you're probably going to want to put it into more of a forceful situation where you're messaging these users to let them know that we're out of hours now and we want to start shutting down these VMs. So that's the way the behavior works. So out of the box, if you're not configuring, if you do exactly what Jake put in his slides, you're going to have graceful logoffs. It's going to wait for users to log off, and it's not going to message them. But I'm going to run through the config here. Okay, so let's cover some detailed configuration options. All right, so as Jake mentioned, you run this create config script, and this create config script, what it actually does is spit out an XML file, and that XML file is what is used, what's read by the decision-making script in order to do everything. So it's scripted creation, mainly because It's using a native XML export from PowerShell. All right, so it looks a bit of a mess. So I wanted an easy way for that to be managed. It was easy for me to create the script to export the XML because I'm just creating an object and then spitting that out essentially. And then it's easy to import again, and it knows all the variable types and everything else. But you can have manual additions, so I'll have a look at that and we'll cover it. And next to each option, you're going to see a related config option. So if I open up this VM here, all right, this is just a VM in my lab, and this is what PowerScale is currently running on. So every now and then we're going to get a PowerShell pop-up where the script kicks in and runs, but that's fine because when it runs, we'll sort of have a bit of a view of what it's actually doing. So this is the folder that it's actually sitting in. And you can see here I've got a few more things. It's been there for a while. I've probably got a few hangover files from development, but this config file is what we really are looking at. So if we open this up, what you'll see in this config file is that I have a comment variable for every option. So performance script location. As Jake mentioned earlier, number one, if you're downloading this and you're going to put it into your environment, just turn testing only to true, and then it won't actually do anything. It will give you the logs, it will run and evaluate the machines and whatever state the farm is at the moment, and it will tell you, hey, I'm expecting to see this many machines turned on, and actually you've got this, so this is what I'm going to do. But it won't actually do it. It will just log it out for you so you can check, make sure it's behaving the way you want it to. All right, so that config XML file, that's what's generated from your create config file, and that's then static. I mean, like I say, you can edit if you want to, because once you've actually got it open, you'll see here you'll have business start time, business close time, out of hours machines, and in hours machines. So what I'll just briefly cover is what I've got in the lab and what we're going to be looking at. So I use Zen Center for my machines, and I'm sorry, I know it's terrible and not many people love it, but I think it's pretty good, especially as it's free. And it seems to be pretty stable. It runs for years in a lot of client environments, and they never reboot it. It's like 4 years uptime or something like that on some of these hosts. But these are the 4 VMs that I'm using for PowerScale. So at the moment, my business close time is 6. I should now have 2 machines off, or two machines switched on. For whatever reason, I haven't, but we'll, didn't pray to the gods of demo, obviously. But we'll cover that in a second. So, test mode. As I said before, put that to true, and it will spit you out a log file, which will tell you exactly what it's expecting and what it's doing. So in our PowerScale folder, we have a logs file. Now you can configure where you want to put these. I've just put them in the same folder as everything else. So what I actually did, I opened up my PowerScale log folder here. You can see there that it just prompted me to tell me that it's changed. And what it said here is performance scan is enabled. It's grabbed the performance measurement for the machines. It's had a look at the memory average. Everything else is pretty much 0. The machines aren't doing anything, by the way. I've got nothing running on them. They're not servicing anything. And it says the current powered on machines is 4 and the target is 4. So at the moment, I'm still good. So I must have some sort of like time zone differential or some sort of issue there. With regards to performance scaling, we've got a couple of options here. So you can turn performance scaling off. You can just mark this variable here as false, and then it won't even attempt to grab the performance counters from the machines. So what you will get is your sessions on the machine and your load index, but because that comes from the delivery controllers, but you won't get any of the WMI counters, CPU and memory. Okay, so what options do we have here? we can control our machine scaling, and that's configured through this variable here. So if we select machine scaling is CPU based, that means it's going to be looking at our CPU threshold. Okay, so just jumping over again into the config file. You see here machine scaling is set to CPU, and I have an 85% threshold. Now that threshold is farm wide, so it evaluates all of the machines and then creates averages of those values. And that's actually what it's going to put in the dashboard that I'll show you a bit later. What I find is load index is a pretty good one to have for this, because you can configure your load index via additional thresholds. So you can actually you can start meshing together your CPU and your memory to give a load index value, which then the farm will scale on. But bear in mind, it's still an average. So what you'd probably do is put the script in, turn on the testing, so it's just creating you the log files and the dashboards, and then monitor what your farm's doing through the day and what your average value of your load index looks like, to try and work out where your peak is, and actually, is performance okay? Are your users screaming and saying they need more machines? Is everything good? Can you actually scale it down? Which is actually what's happening a lot, where people are actually using this. So the WMI monitoring bit, right? It uses get counter, PowerShell counters, and it actually connects to the machine. The script is configured. If you don't configure a service account or a WMI account to monitor the machines with, it will try and use the account that you're running the script with instead. If that account doesn't have permissions, the script will not run, purely because it won't be able to actually talk to the Citrix farm and get the performance counters. So just to have a look what options you've got here. You see here we've got performance sample interval, and that's currently set to 1, and performance samples is set to 5. What this means is we're grabbing a performance sample, we're grabbing a CPU metric and a memory metric every second for 5 seconds. So this is quite a quick process. We're not doing it for very long. Now, this needs to balance against how often you run your script and how many machines you have. So there's no exact science for this, and I haven't been able to gather enough information in the environments that have run it to see any problems or identify really a recommended value. So honestly, you're going to have to put this in and really watch it and try and work out what you need to set these things to. An example environment would be an Azure environment where they've got 30 session servers. They went from starting with SmartScale, starting 22 machines every day, and then scaling up on session numbers up to 30 machines, to using this and starting off with 16 machines first thing in the morning. Because actually what happens is they've got staff rotations and call centers and things, and actually most of the staff all come in at about lunchtime, and that's when they actually need it. So there was a cost saving immediately there, and then obviously we've got the shutdowns after hours. All right, cool. So to force or not to force, sounds provocative, doesn't it? User sessions can be gracefully logged off or forced off. So you can configure messages within the config file, and they'll get a message sent to them initially when it's out of hours, as soon as the script runs and it's triggered in an out of hours window, and it will say, hey, you need to log off, whatever you decide to put in there. There's then a configurable interval, so you can say 5 minutes, 10 minutes, then it sends another message. Then there's another configurable interval, and then it will log the users off. Okay, but you have the option to send them 2 messages before you actually kick them off the machines. Now, even if you wanted that set to sort of 30-minute intervals, that wouldn't actually be a problem. The only problem would be that the script would be running for that period of time, because it's all done in one script run. But that shouldn't be too much of a problem because it's your out of hours piece. It should be the end of the day. So that's configurable through force user log off. Now, as I've put in here, if it's false, then we'll just be gracefully waiting for these users to log off before we do anything. And that's clearly stated in my log. It actually loops through and tells you there's users on this machine. I'm going to leave it alone. And then there's also an option there. It will tell you in the log file that it's going to log these users off. So it also tells you who it's kicking off forcefully. So you can't get someone coming in the morning and say, hey, I got kicked off. You can go and have a look at the log files and see if they're telling you porkies or embellishing the story. So let's just have a look. Okay, so we've got force user log off here. So it states the comment, force user sessions to be logged off out of hours or allow user sessions to drain. So here I've actually got that set to true. So not that anybody logs onto my lab machines. It is literally just for the development, but if someone did, I'd be kicking them off. Okay, what the interval is. Now this interval is actually in minutes. I know you've got the S, that just means it's a string in PowerShell. So that's 1 minute. And then it's going to send another message, then another minute, and then it'll log them off. Okay, and what did I say? There it is. So this is what the script looks like when it's actually running. I did this deliberately. It's running via a scheduled task, but I did this deliberately so that if I was talking about something, we'd get the pop-up and we could actually see what it's doing. So we had a question earlier about run jobs and performance in run jobs. So if I just hop down here, okay, unfortunately I was too slow. The performance monitoring stuff had already finished, so I didn't actually get to see it, but what I was looking for was the resource usage for the additional PowerShell processes. Okay, cool. So this is what we've got, and this is what we're going to get every script run. Now, I actually run this every 15 minutes. I think if you're doing performance scaling, then you should be running it relatively regularly. If you've got a farm of 100 machines, you're going to have a relatively big gap in between the script runs. You're going to have to time how long a script run takes. Again, you do it in test mode. It's not going to make any changes. I'll put the timestamps in the logs so you can see a start and a finish. And that's how you sort of test it to see where you're going. So what happens if I want to work on one? What I'm alluding to there is what happens if I want to isolate a machine. So if I have a machine that's problematic or users complaining about, I don't know, sometimes machine creation services doesn't always make them identical. It's rare, but sometimes it doesn't. Then you can isolate a machine. The way you do that is by using tags in Studio. And what that will do is it will actually take that machine out of the loop. So I'm going to give you a quick look how that works, all right? So I'm going to manage the tags on this machine here, and I'm just going to exclude that. Simple as that. Create a tag called excluded. That is configurable too. You can name it whatever you like. Just slap it in the config file. All right, that's just exclusion tag is here. All right, as an option. Now that's done, I'm just going to kick this off again. Now what we should see in the log file here, because I've now excluded that machine, we should now see that the PowerScale complaining that actually I need to spin up another machine because I should have force switched on, but I can't because I haven't got enough machines in the machine catalog and there's not any machines in maintenance mode for me to turn back into production servers. Too quick for you to see in the script, but let's reload the log. Right, so there are 3 machines on and registered. There are 0 machines in maintenance mode. There are zero machines powered off. There are 0 machines to be placed into service. The number of machines available is 0 and the number required is 1. And it tells you a warning, there are not enough machines here. So so it does things like that. So you can't, it doesn't matter if you put in more than you've got, it's going to work that out. So you need them in the machine catalog, or you need them in a machine catalog that matches the name prefix for it to find them and spin them up. As Jake mentioned previously, it's all done from this hosting connection here. All right, so every power action is from this. So that's why it's agnostic. It can be any public cloud that is supported by Studio. It can be any hypervisor that's supported by Studio. As long as the machine can be power managed by Citrix Studio, then you'll be able to use this to control the scale up, scale down. So a little bit about this WMI account, right? Because you're going to want to give this account maybe slightly higher credentials, and you don't want anyone to be able to sort of grab this. I'm aware that I've got a dashboard in here and it's HTML based. Some people might think it's a great idea to just slap the PowerScale folder on a IS server or something, or host that out. And it is a great idea, but we don't want users or anybody that's malicious to try and grab those WMI credentials. So what I put here is when you run that create config file, what it actually does is it spits out for you these two files, which is the WMI account password encrypted with an SSL key. So it's that key, and when the script runs, it decrypts that password for you. So no one can go and just look at this without having those files, okay? And they have to know what they to do with those files in order to get the key anyway. But in the config, what you'll notice is when it's written, you actually don't have a WMI service account password in here, because it's actually part of those keys, and the script's hard-coded to look for those keys. So don't delete those, because then you won't have a password for your service account. Or get rid of the service account and run the scheduled task as an elevated account that has the right permissions. One or the other though. But I wanted to give people the option. So log files. The log files are in depth. If you're running it every 15 minutes, you get a lot of detail, and most of the time the detail is identical, especially if it's sort of during the day and your users aren't really hammering the machines very much. So what I did here is I allowed you to put a retention number in for the number of days that we should keep log files for. And what you'll notice here is we've got a log number of days and a log location option. So you can put in the full name of the log, and PowerScale will just back it up at a certain time in the day. So if we hop over to our config again, we have our log location and log number of days. All right, so we're keeping 5 days worth of log files. So if I just hop in here, you can see I've got 5 days worth of logs. Put as many as you want in there. That makes absolutely no difference to the script. It's a very quick process. So what about dashboard files? I mean, this is the interesting bit, right? I wrote this script and I pretty much had it feature equivalent at least by the 31st of May when SmartScale was going to go. And I put it on GitHub and was sharing it around. And it's great because it did what it was supposed to do, but you couldn't really see anything. And log files are not interesting. You know, it doesn't matter how pretty you make them or how well worded they are, they're just not very interesting and they're difficult to read. So I came up with this idea that I should just have some sort of dashboard. David Brett's EUC monitoring community tool had a dashboard, and that's a really cool project. If you haven't checked that out, it's sort of a free monitoring tool which creates HTML dashboards. It's also integrated into a time-based database called Grafana. So, sorry, that's the front end, but it gives you some really nice, interesting stuff about license usage and whether whether parts of your Citrix farm are up. And I know there's a new version supposed to be coming out soon, so watch out for that. But anyway, I created a HTML dashboard, and I gave you the option to, one, have the dashboard, but two, retain the data. Now, the data retention was really sort of something I had to do because the graphing configuration inside the HTML What it does is it sort of summarizes the data, so you don't have too many data points to look at. And having sort of 2 or 3 days data summarized with no ability to sort of drill down, that didn't really help. So I came up with the idea of just retaining the dashboards and then automatically editing them to link them together, which I'll show you shortly. So there's a dashboard backup time. Now this is actually pretty important. This is when you want your dashboard to change. So when you want your current one to be archived and a new one to be started. Now there's a really important variable that you must set, okay? And it's based on how often your script is run. Now, if you only run this once or twice a day, you'll have 2 points on your graph and that's it. So it's not going to be incredibly interesting to look at. If you run it sort of every half an hour, you'll have a data point every half an hour. But whatever you run it at, whatever interval you run it to, remember to set the script run interval in the config file. That's this one here. Which I'll find for you any minute now. There it is. There's people on the other end of the line screaming, it's there, it's there, go up, go up, go up. This script run interval is set to 15 minutes because my scheduled task is set to 15 minutes. The reason you need to fill this in is because when it does the time comparison to work out when to back up these dashboards and when to archive them, it needs to know, am I within within 15 minutes either side of 4 a.m. and that's how it works out whether or not it should back those up. If that's not configured, if your script doesn't run bang on 4 a.m. and I'm talking about seconds as well, then it's not going to back it up. So that's why I did that, so that it would work, and that's worked so far anyway. Okay, cool. So let's go and have a look at the dashboard. How do I see what's going on? Log files are boring. What I've put on here, we've got machine statuses, performance metrics. There's a little bar on the right hand side that gives you sort of config metrics, and there is a small error window which will pull out any errors from the log files and show you them in the dashboard too. And there's some historical linking. So pretty much it should contain everything. So let's have a nose firstly in my lab dashboard. I mentioned I've got a real life one for you. Okay, oh, I already had it open. So currently we can see here I've excluded a machine, and I did that just now. So you can see here I've got one machine excluded, and you can actually see here I had 3 machines. I dropped down to 2, then we hit 6 a.m. and it spun up some more. And because I excluded one, I now only have 3 machines turned on. So what I'll do now, all right, just so you can see how this is going to work, I'm just going to go over to my config file, and I'm going to change my in-hours machines to 2 and my out-of-hours machines to 1. It'll make sense surely, and I'll just run that. Oh no, I have it open, don't I? Right, I've mistyped something, haven't I? Or maybe not.
Those demo gods come to get you.
It happens, doesn't it, Jake? Yeah.
It's a curse.
Oh. Yeah, I'm not quite sure what I've done wrong. Cannot find minutes to target. I've put a typo in here somewhere. I've done something when I've been showing you something. Good old text pad. I've broken it. Well, I've broken it. I'm gonna have to fix it, aren't I? Ideal opportunity, really. Okay, so I'm gonna hop back here, and I think we'll rerun it. We'll rerun the config. All right, cool. Luckily, I'd saved it. Didn't look like it, did it though? Okay, I've broken my lab. You have to take my word for it, guys. It definitely works. All right. So going back to the dashboard stuff, that's the lab dashboard, which is not very exciting. So what I'll do is I'll show you a real life one. So this is a client of mine that's running PowerScale to control on and off. It's an Azure environment. All right, and we've got CPU metrics, memory metrics, load index, and sessions here as well. So we can see an average roughly of what's going on at whatever time. So bear in mind that all of these are average metrics across however many machines are switched on at the time. And up here we have how many we've got scaled on. So we start off 12 in the morning and we quickly scale up to 18. Then we're scaling again around lunchtime, and then we're running down as we get towards the end of the day. Now, what I was talking about in the PowerPoint with regards to the configuration details on the right-hand side, it tells you if you're in test mode or not, which controller you're actually accessing. And I know I'm going to get a question about resiliency in controllers. What happens if I reboot one? If you reboot the controller that's configured with this, it's not going to work. The machine prefix that's being used, business start time, business end time, and how I'm scaling. Now, something that I needed to put in here that I haven't got in here yet, and I know about, is how many machines I want in business hours and how many machines I want out of hours. Then I've got CPU, the last run of CPU, what's that? The last memory, average. And that's just based on my last data point, because it is static HTML. The values are sort of replaced as the script runs. So it tells you your threshold. So the index threshold is 8,000. If I scroll down here and have a bit of a nose, we can see we sort of hit that around 11:30 a.m. So if we just have a nose at 11:30 a.m., all right, we've got it about there. We can see it's picked it up and it's scaled on small machines. So every time the script runs, it's going to update this dashboard. And then as we, every time it retains it, it's going to give you a new dashboard and link this up the top here. So you can go back as many days as you like and it'll just have that many dates. So you can just straight away see how many machines you've got out of hours and then what happens when it hits business hours and starts powering them on. Now I didn't look at the log files and stuff. I just stole these dashboards. You can brand that if you want to. I mean, it is just HTML. Within the folder, so we'll just jump over to PowerScale. If you look in this template folder, these are the files, don't delete them, but these are the files you would edit if you wanted to rebrand it. So the HTML file is actually the dashboard before it has the values in it, and the JavaScript's the chart data and what it's doing. And that actually gets copied into this dashboard folder, which then has sort of JSON elements for the graphing details. All right, I think what I'll do is I'll open it up for questions right now because we haven't got that many slides left.
Okay, great. Can you use this with Citrix Cloud too, even though AutoScale is available?
Can you use this with Citrix Cloud? That is a good question. So, I mean, technically, yes, because your cloud connector is actually your controller. So there's no reason why you couldn't point it at that, and you have the same sort of set of PowerShell commandlets. I think that would probably work, but coming up later, you're going to see a slide for a community project to allow people like us to get a Citrix cloud subscription for testing in usage, unless Jake, you know the answer to the question.
I don't, I'm afraid. I'd kind of go with the same as what you said. I imagine it would work, but I wouldn't want to say yes until I tried it.
Whoever asked the question, the best thing you could do is follow the link on the GitHub to the Slack channel and post it on there. We've got a few of the other guys, David Wilkinson. He will probably know the answer to this question off the top of his head. But post it on there, you're bound to get an answer.
Okay, you kind of went over this a little bit, but how is draining maintenance mode and notification handled? I don't think your systems went into maintenance mode. They just had the communication. Is that right?
Yeah, so there's no drainage at the moment. It is something that I've been asked for a couple of times. So actually session draining, so putting some of the machines into maintenance mode at some sort of configurable period, which actually makes a lot of sense. You know, maybe put them in maintenance mode mid-afternoon, for example, so that they drain off gracefully without having to message users. At the moment, though, the behavior is just the users are either left to log off on their own, and SmartScale will just keep running as a scheduled task and checking to see if those machines are empty, and as soon as they're empty, it'll shut them down. Or you configure a message which is with intervals that is forceful and will actually forcefully log the users off.
Okay, next question. How much usage has this had in the field so far?
That's a good question. I've got 3 of my clients using it. So they're, I'd say, probably mid-scale Citrix environments. Anywhere between sort of 150 to 30 machines is the smallest. So that's actually in use and working reliably. But I haven't heard anything from anyone that they've put this out into a larger environment at the moment.
Okay. Does the script randomize the order that the servers are turned on, or will it always pick the same ones first?
That's a good question too. So what it will actually do, I believe, for power-ons, I think it might even be by alphabetical order. So it could actually be the same ones. It'd be dead easy to make it random, but at the moment it does it by just alphabetical order. I'm pretty sure that they might not even be sorted, so it's probably by machine name, because that's what we're looking at, the DNS name for the machine. It would be easy to add something. With regards to shutting them down, it just lists them out in least number of sessions first. So we should get all the 0 ones at the top and they'll be logged off, or they'll be shut down straight away.
Mm-hmm. Okay, if you set the number of sessions to 5, for example, will it wait until all servers are running 5 sessions before starting new servers, or will it bring up servers as consumption gets closer to that number?
It will. It's a hard trigger, so it will wait until the farm average is 5, and then it will spin up more. So you add 5 sessions per server, and then it will fire up another one.
Okay. Is it recommended to run the option configuration script each time new options are updated? Do all options have to be re-entered each time, or does it grab existing configurations and just ask for the info? Then if the info is different, it will update the XML.
No, so it regenerates the XML from scratch every single time. So in an environment where you're going to be running that create config file, you can save the details of the create config file. Just remember not to save the WMI service account password in it.
Okay. What is the difference between this and the built-in scaling scheduling within Studio?
Okay, so within Studio, you can actually set some sort of scaling metrics. Well, maybe not scaling metrics, but you can you can set how many or a percentage of machines that you want switched on for Zen Desktop. And when I talk Zen Desktop, I mean sort of a desktop-based OS. There is nothing for server-based OSs in Studio. You can have reboot schedules, but there's actually no power management for them in that respect. Once you turn on a server machine, it's on. So that's one of the reasons this was sort of brought forward, really.
Awesome. And then this is the supporting question that with more clarification about the question on the script for a VDI use case was primarily for Windows 10 VM VDI environment. The existing Citrix Studio MCS power management does provide some control, but it does not cater for on-demand power on. I was wondering if this script could be ported to provide more control for managing the power on-off of Windows 10 VMs based on user logons.
Oh, cool. Okay, right. Now that makes perfect sense. Yeah, okay. That's a good question. Essentially, yes, it would work. You would have to disable Studio's power management stuff. Okay, so you'd have to tell it not to power off your VDI machines when the users log off and stuff, because then PowerScale would actually say, oh, hang on, I haven't got enough, and it would start firing them up again. It depends if you want that sort of behavior. So when you're using SmartScale, or when people were using SmartScale for that, there was an article that basically told you disable the power management for desktop-based OSs because it will conflict with SmartScale. It'd be the same sort of scenario here. But you could use this to manage desktop OS as well. Yeah, no problem.
Awesome. Let me just do one more check. Everyone appreciates your work. And that's about it for the questions.
Cool. All right. Well, I'll just skip through. I have a few thank yous actually. So, I mean, this took a lot of time to put together, and it wasn't just me on my own. Jake's obviously grabbed it, set it up in his lab, and he's done some testing with it. So thanks to Jake, and doing the webinar with me as well. I want to thank Stanimir Shabdarov. He is an ex-colleague of mine, and he's put some code in and bits and pieces in there as well. He actually did some of the coding for the logging retention. So thanks to Stan. I want to thank some people indirectly who weren't directly involved, but contributed to me really and give me ideas and things on what to put in here. So Dennis Spann, he actually wrote the bit of PowerShell that encrypts the credentials within the SSL files. That's his blog, and it came from him. So I want to say thanks there. Jim Moyle, he actually spent some time with me writing some analytical PowerShell for some FSLogix load testing, and he gave me the ideas about the XML export and the JSON export techniques. I didn't know they existed in PowerShell, but he was the one that showed me that, so I want to say thanks to Jim. And then a couple of guys that work at one of my clients, Rukshan Pires and Ian Burns, they're colleagues and testers, so these guys have embraced this, and they're actually monitoring it and watching it work every day, and feeding back to me any problems and everything, and sort of spearheading, I suppose, bug fixing. So cool, excellent. So questions, I think we've pretty much covered them all, right, René? We haven't got any more?
No new questions. Okay,
then I want to thank you everyone for attending, and I'm just going to hand over to Stephanie briefly for a couple more slides.
Sure, thank you, Leee, and thank you, Jake and René. Thanks everyone for being with us today. As Leee mentioned earlier, if you are interested in picking up a slightly more affordable Citrix Cloud subscription, Leee has been participating in a project that is a community-based, and Leee may be able to talk about this more intelligently than me, but a community-based subscription that's going to make it more affordable for people like us in the community to get into Citrix Cloud. If you're not part of an organization that can buy a subscription, I think is it 25 users required to get started. So some people can't do that on their own.
Spot on actually, Stephanie. Yeah. So I had the idea, I wanted to pick up a Citrix Cloud subscription, found a price for it. I'm an independent consultant, so looking at the price for it, I was pretty shocked. And I sort of thought, well, wouldn't it be good if a load of us could get together and have a shared Citrix Cloud subscription? Kevin Howe, HTG, he said, right, okay, if you want to do that, Lee, I'll help you. We'll, front end the deal and we'll put it to Citrix. And it's all sort of been going through. So we're not allowed to give prices publicly, okay, but you can register your information in a web form, and then I will send you some documentation if you like what you read, and obviously the cost of it, which is, I have to say, highly discounted. But the idea is the more of us there are, the better it will be. It doesn't matter who you are or where you work, you can sign up for this and you'll have access to Citrix Cloud and you'll be able to play with it, see how it works, everything else. So please, if you're interested, fill in your details at that link there and we'll send you some info.
Thanks. So, and I think Lee, you guys are going to share the slide deck after the presentation. So we'll make sure that everyone on here today gets a copy of the slide deck. So you'll have all of these resources available to you. So that is pretty much it for us today. I just want to point out a couple of links I've put in the chat for you. I've got a link to a forum thread on mycugc.org. If you have more questions or want to talk about this webinar some more, you can come visit that thread, put them in there. I'll make sure Lee and Jake see those. There's also a link to a survey. It's short, it's anonymous. We just like to get your feedback on all of our webinars, so hope you'll fill that out. And finally, a link to CUGC upcoming events. We have events going on all over the place. I think, Lee, I just saw your name on the next UK meeting, did I not, on the agenda?
You will have done indeed, yes. I'm going to run a session on SD-WAN, so sort of a practical quick start, set it up, have a play with it. So it should be like a walkthrough on the config. And if all goes well and some parts arrive, I should have a mock-up SD-WAN device for demo right there and then.
Awesome. So please check out our events calendar. We have webinars on there. We have our Excel events, like the UK one coming up. We also have an Excel event out in the Midwest and on the Great Lakes. So those are Cincinnati and Milwaukee events. They're full day events, just like the UK event, all day long, technical speakers, all day, great food, prizes, lots of good stuff. So check those out. And finally, please be sure to follow us on Twitter at MyCUGC. That's the best way to stay up to date on everything that we do. So make sure you follow us and know what's going on. And again, just thank you guys for being with us today. I appreciate everyone's time. And thanks again, Lee and Jake. And thank you, Renee, for keeping an eye on all those questions. And you guys will receive links to the recording from today, the slide deck, all this great stuff. We'll have that out to you in an email tomorrow. All right, I hope you all have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you on mycugc.org soon. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Stephanie. Bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
Stephanie. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Cheers.